Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Govin here with secretsoflongevity.com. I have a lot of different apps I use on my phone. These can obviously be on iPhone or Android or a tablet, but this is the only medium in which I use apps at the moment. And there's definitely a couple that I found to be directly related to my health and wealth. And I wanted to share those top 5 with you, so you can consider either getting them and see what they're like, or just jumping right in and finding one that's similar that can function with the same purpose in what I'm recommending. So there's actually 2 in particular which I think are great to have, but they don't have to be this specific type or this specific brand of app. It's the purpose behind them which I find very useful. So the first one I wanted to mention, and this is one of the ones that you could find other types of, is some way of tracking calories and your intake of food. I'm using the Livestrong app, and while I'm not trying to lose weight, I don't intend to do this for years on end, or even months on end, but by tracking what you're eating, it gives you that hyper-awareness of what it is you're doing. And it's a good way to take a step back and really examine everything you're consuming, and you can even weed out the little things that you might not want to be eating, and just having that awareness by tracking it, as they say, what gets measured gets managed. You're able to empower your will to make changes and choices like that. So for me, I'm trying to incorporate more fat and less carbohydrates in my diet for my own reasons. I don't recommend that for everyone, but if that's something that you're drawn to doing, that is a great way to do it. Or it could be the other side of things where you want to cut out fats, or you want to cut out protein, or at least bring it down. And so with this app, it gives a nice breakdown as you're going through your day of your total percentage of calories that come from each of the 3 groups. So this is a way of tracking macronutrients. You're not going to be tracking micronutrients as well. There are some desktop applications if you really want to get into doing that. I know among 80-10-10ers, they're very big on some, I think it's chronometer or calorimeter or something. I've never used that, and maybe there's even an app for that, and that would be great to use as well. But this has just been the one that I've been drawn to and have liked the most. I tried a few more when I was preparing for this video. Another one people talked about a lot was MyFitnessPal. I didn't overly resonate with that one. The only downside to the Livestrong one I found was I spent all this time programming all these foods in, because you do generally have to do that and like write down how many grams of fats, carbohydrates, and proteins are in different quantities of this. And so once you have a sufficient buildup of those things, it's much easier to use. But for some reason the app crashed and I lost all that information I put in. So actually after the fact I had to create a profile, and now it's actually saving all that to the cloud. So app number 2, just like tracking your caloric intake, can be great and be a good way to give that hyper awareness and strengthen your willpower around any changes you want to make. Doing the same thing with your finances is just as useful. Even if you don't have big overspending habits or you're not in debt, this is even more essential if you're in debt. You want to track what it is you're doing, and sets up those habits that once you maybe decide not to use the app every day, you've at least developed these things that can get you back on track, or narrow in with your intent of saving money or making more or whatever it is you're doing. So that's a way of setting up, I only want to spend this much a month on snacks that I eat out, whether it's at a cafe or buying at the grocery store. I have this much for essential groceries, I have this much for clothing, I have this much for this, that, and the other thing. Good way to figure that out, but it's also a good way to see where it is you're overspending in certain areas. So that, to me, those 2 things, tracking calories and tracking finances, doesn't have to be something you do for the rest of your life, but doing it in set chunks throughout your life is a way to get back on track, hone your willpower, and like I said, what gets measured gets managed. It's very essential. So one more health app, number 3 here, is something I just recently got, which I'm very excited to use this summer. Is an app called WildEdibles, which was developed by Steve Brill. He's famous for being a wild foods teacher down in New York City. He actually takes walks through Central Park with people and shows them some basics on wild food foraging. And this is great because I've got a half dozen or more wild herb and wild foraging books, but it's not that often that I find myself out and suddenly having the desire to pick some wild edibles just maybe for a salad that night I don't even have a book on me, so I have to rely on the ones I've got memorized. But I've got 150 or more herbs in here, which are being updated. The basic app only has, a dozen or 2 dozen wild edibles, but with the full app, which is $7.99, it's the only one in this top 5 list that costs money. You're getting over 150 different edibles with tons of information. One of the best things I saw on it was it gives warnings about what poisonous ones, but also lookalikes to poisonous ones. So for example, on chickweed, it has this little cautionary triangle, which means that it has a lookalike that's poisonous. So chickweed's edible, but on all its pictures it has that thing to remind you there's something that looks like it. That is something you certainly don't want to be consuming. So if you have it on your phone, you're generally someone that carries that wherever you go, then you have the ease of being able to identify stuff. And it's a great learning tool, but it's also just a good precautionary tool that you can look things up. There are a lot of plants that look similar to other things, and the only downside to that is it's really only going to be applicable to these regions where those plants grow, which is above subtropical regions in North America, maybe a little bit in Europe. The majority of you guys who are viewing this are from those areas, US, Canada, parts of the UK and Europe. You're going to have a lot of those plants, but it's not going to be the case in the Far East, around the equator. Perhaps there are some in Australia, I'm not sure about that, but perhaps that's a place that if any of you out there want to develop something, that could be something you could propose to Steve to get in on, or develop your own app for your region of the globe. And for another $1, as an add-on to that, you can get a whole host of recipes for all the wild edibles that are in that list. There already are some recipes associated with each one, but this is just, I think, 500 more recipes added in, which is quite remarkable. App number 4 I'm going to talk about is something that's not actually out yet, but I'm so excited about it, I'm going to tell people about it, and there's a waiting list to get in on the beta. And I think if you can get in on this, it's going to be great. It's a zero commission stock trading app. It's called Robinhood. It's quite exciting when you consider, anything that's out there for trading stocks. It usually costs anywhere from $5 to $10. Sometimes if you're just starting out, it's going to even cost more. I know at my bank, it's over $20, close to $30 just to make one trade. So say you save up $1,000 and you want to put it into the stock market, it's going to cost you $29, which you have to assume you're going to make back in gains. And then you're also reticent to make little trades because it's going to cost you that much every time, no matter how small or large the trade is. Now, I'm not going to go into depth about how this is possible. There's a number of ways that app, that company makes money. But anyways, I'm going to stick a link below if you want to check it out and sign up for the beta waiting list. It is only going to be available in the US at first, but I'm hoping it's available in Canada and other parts of the world. So this is essentially taking down the gatekeepers of stock brokerage industry. And it is funded by Google, so I'm quite impressed because that probably means it's not going to be taken down, through some sort of legislation or other ways that businesses try to squeeze out competition on their bottom end. So my 5th and final app that I'm going to recommend people check out is one that applies to both health and wealth, and it's kind of indirect for both of them. This is called Duolingo. It's a way to learn language. There's a few languages programmed into the app, and you choose whatever one you want to learn. And at the moment, I believe it's 5, 6, 7 different languages, and they're mostly all Western languages. I'd be very excited once they introduce maybe Mandarin into that, because that's the second most spoken language worldwide. Number 1 is Spanish, number 3 is English. And so I'm teaching myself Spanish with that. It's basically, it gamifies learning language. So there's little things set up to incentivize you to learn it. And it's very well laid out and very easy to use. I'll give an example of what I'm doing here. I'm like oh, perfect. So this is one of the examples where you have to actually speak. There's other ones which are spelling or translation from English to Spanish or Spanish to English, but you can choose French, German, Portuguese. I believe if you speak one of the other languages, you can learn English. El perro bebe agua. Did I get it right? Taking its sweet time. It's usually a little quicker at, there, that means I got it right. And so there's, each step, there's, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen, maybe 20 things you have to get correct. You have a certain number of lives to get something right or wrong. before you have to redo that level. And you can even connect it up to Facebook and follow your friends and see their progress on different languages that they're learning. So it's pretty interesting that way. So learning a new language is an excellent way to exercise your brain, and as you learn things, it's really good for your brain, for your memory, and for your long-term brain health. Crosswords are a great thing, and they're well known to prevent Alzheimer's and any kind of brain puzzle. Language does the same thing. I wouldn't put it in the exact same category as puzzles like that, but it's exercising a part of your brain that a lot of people let die off as they get older. They don't keep learning language. They don't improve the language they already know and learned in school, perhaps. I had the great fortune of learning French as I grew up in school. I haven't used it much at all because I've just been living in a place that speaks just English. But if you travel a lot, you obviously develop the language centers of your brain. Taking lessons and learning any language is going to do that. But this app does it very easily. You can do 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 levels a day, which doesn't take much time at all. It takes maybe 5 minutes or less to get through one level. And if you want to have any kind of business that extends beyond just your country, most likely you might have to be doing some in other languages. And so the 3 big languages of the business world are English, Spanish, and Mandarin. Now, like I said, it doesn't have Mandarin on there, but that's something I'd be interested in learning. Almost every South American country, you're going to need Spanish. There's going to be some you need Portuguese, of course, but Spanish is the dominant language. And if you have some of these basics, you're going to be able to get by a lot easier. Helps your wealth, helps your health. I think it's good all around for that purpose. So I hope you like these recommendations for apps. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Also, whether or not you have your own app that you think could fit into either of these 2 categories that can improve our lives in that sense. I think we could all learn from each other about the useful tools that we have on our devices. So with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.